we'll get started. Hi, welcome everyone. Hope you had a good day full of sessions yesterday, and we still have a jam-packed day today, and then Ship It Live and Bash, and lots of stuff to look forward to. Quick reminder to just always rate and review the talks in your app after. It really helps us determine what content we should put in our next summit. So we have two wonderful Atlassians up next. We have Leanna and Hillary. And some fun facts. Hillary's childhood dog was actually the heaviest member of her family. And Leanna is allergic to Twinkies. So, welcome.
Oh. Test. Okay. Thank you, Shannon. Good morning. Today I want to start by, I need the clicker. Today I want to start by asking you to please raise your hand if you've ever been interrupted in a meeting setting.
Something. Oh, sorry, was I interrupting you?
Oh,
My
the
bad.
nerve of this girl. Something exactly like that. Let's try this again. Please raise your hand if you ever have been interrupted in a meeting setting. Look around you. We've all been there. And we know that it's not fun. And Leanna and I particularly struggled with this when we first started our work. And we wanted to know if this is because we're young, because we're women, do other people struggle with this? And it actually turns out that women in tech are 3 times more likely to be interrupted in meetings than their male colleagues. And we said, okay, so this is a problem for women, but do other people struggle in meetings? And we went around and asked our fellow Atlassians what they thought about it.
In any conversation, everybody has stuff they want to say, and there isn't enough time for everybody to say everything they want to say, so it's definitely the people that are more willing to interrupt others or command the floor that get to say more.
There was one meeting where I felt like I had things to say, but everyone was so passionate, I had no chance to say anything, so I just stayed back until everyone else left and told the facilitator directly.
If you asked me a couple months ago, I'd say 5% of times, or a very small number of times, I would actually get whatever I wanted to say said. But having had my mentor and pushing me to kind of ask my questions and speak up in meetings, I have definitely tried to focus more on that and be a little bit more persistent on that. And I actually set that as a couple of months ago when I was setting personal goals. That was one of my personal goals, to be able to speak up more in meetings, make sure that I do get my opinion across, or whatever I wanted to say across.
So clearly, it's hard. Meetings are hard. And they've gotten harder lately with the increase of remote work. We know that 70% of people globally work remotely once a week. And if you're one of these people, so maybe this many of you, you can probably relate to this guy.
Do we have the right folks on this call? Hello? Hello? One sec, Google Hangouts isn't working again. God damn it.
So that happens all too often. And so after a bit of digging, what it comes down to is that a ton of employees, but especially introverts, remote workers, and women, struggle to speak up and be heard in meetings. And we know this, and we also know, if you've been to the keynote or the second keynote, or you follow Atlassian relatively at all, that diversity leads to better outcomes. And diversity specifically is talking about 2D diversity. And what this is both inherent and acquired diversity. So inherent diversity is things like gender, age, race. And acquired diversity is things like maybe you've had military experience or you speak 10 languages. And studies across the board have shown that companies with these 2 types of diversity perform better in lots of different ways. So they're 45% more likely to report improved market share. They're 70% more likely to report capturing a new market. And so if you look at this very precisely scaled graph, it's clear that as diversity of thought goes up, so do team outcomes. And that's from market growth to employee retention to efficiency. So if we know that diversity of thought makes our teams better, but we also know that lots of our colleagues struggle to get their thoughts out and be heard in meetings, we land on our problem. When not all voices have a chance to be heard, we miss out on valuable opportunities and insights, and maybe the best solution to the problem. So we wanted to know why. Why is it so hard for some people to speak up and be heard? And what we landed on was a set of biases and assumptions that underlie our conscious thoughts and kind of affect the way that we behave, even if we don't believe them. So we want to take a look at some of these biases, and these particular ones are actually identified by the Harvard Business Review. So the first one is that smart people think and act on their feet. So a look at this at play. If I were to ask you all the very difficult question of where should I go eat dinner tonight, you might think that the very first person to raise their hand has the best answer, because of course, they rose their hand first. They must know. But this actually affects introverts in a negative way, because if you're an introverted person, maybe you're actually Chef Audria and you know all of the best restaurants in the city, but you're sitting in the back and you're scared to speak up and you're thinking thoughtfully about what you want to say. So there are ways that we can counteract this bias and actually give all people a chance to get their opinion heard and end up with better outcomes. The next bias is out of sight, out of mind. And this one negatively affects remote workers, because if you're sitting behind a screen and nobody can see you, all of the time they just forget you're in the room. Or maybe you have difficulty hearing all of the natural gaps in language because everyone is talking and you can't figure out the right time to jump in. Or maybe you're right about to say the best thing of your point and the service breaks out. And so out of sight, out of mind is something that harms our remote working colleagues. And lastly, this one's kind of tough for me to swallow, is that men have more to contribute. Obviously, we don't actually believe this, but it's something that can affect the way that we treat our coworkers. And this has been shown in lots of studies where women actually are more likely to be interrupted, as I said earlier, or less likely to receive credit for their ideas, or actually, even when they do speak up, they're actually given lower peer reviews in performance ratings. And so this is pretty rough. You might be thinking to yourself, oh my God, am I a horrible person? Do I think these things? And the answer is yes. No, you're not. Everyone has these things, and there are lots of ways that we can fix them. So I'm going to hand it over to Leanna, who is going to dig in and walk you through some ways that you can actually not be a dick.
Thanks, Hillary. So before I actually walk through the strategies, I have two things that I want to say. The first of which is, when you first came in, there are slips of paper on your chairs. I don't think we had enough, but we can have people raise their hands afterwards. But basically, it has a prompt that asks you, what's your favorite meeting tip? So what works for you during your own meetings? We'd love to know what works for you and kind of harness the valuable insights all of you guys have. Secondly, it would be awesome if you could pass it into the middle of the row, and then Shannon will collect it in a hat throughout the talk. So secondly, the strategies that I'll be covering today will fit some meetings better than others. So what we'll be covering will be good for meetings like brainstorming sessions, or as Shane, the keynote speaker on day one, would want me to say, debates, brainstorming, or I said that already, project kickoff sessions, or really any meeting that's greater than 4 people, because you don't really run to the same types of issues with people talking over each other in groups of 4, right? So I'm going to be walking you through things that you can do before a meeting, during a meeting, and after a meeting. So pretty simple and straightforward, but really, really important. So let's say that you have a meeting. To prepare for the meeting, let's talk about setting an agenda, being selective with the invites, and budgeting enough time. Firstly, try and send an agenda at least 24 hours in advance, and frame topics as open questions and provide links to resources. This is just good meeting etiquette. It's good to let people know who you're going to be talking with and what you're going to be talking about. And this is especially important for 2 primary reasons. The first, providing an agenda provides more processing time. So as Hillary mentioned, introverts do tend to spend a little bit more time introspecting and reflecting before providing a response. So having an agenda at least 24 hours in advance provides ample headspace in order for people to come prepared for the meeting. An agenda also helps to correct information asymmetry. So a lot of conversations and sometimes decisions happen in the office, in the hallway, in passing. And unfortunately, for people who are working remote that day, they're not privy to those conversations. So the playing field isn't exactly level, and not everyone is coming in with the same amount of information. So providing an agenda will have everyone up to date and have everyone be prepared to discuss the latest updates in the meeting. And if you use Confluence, Confluence has a handy-dandy meeting notes template that you can use. There's everything on there. It's really great. We use it, and we love it. The second thing that you can do to prepare for a meeting is to be thoughtful about who you're inviting. The agenda, if you have one, should help invitees determine whether or not they even need to be in the meeting. There's a really old quote from 1575 that goes, "Too many cooks will spoil the broth." So even in the 16th century, they knew that too many people doing something will screw it up, which is basically what happens when you have too many people. It'll be really hard to collaborate and make effective decisions because everyone's just fighting to get their say in, and there's just a lot of stuff going on, and it's just a little bit chaotic. So make sure that invitees know that it's totally okay to decline, and agenda will help them do so. And lastly, to prepare for a meeting, we recommend budgeting enough time to cover everything in the agenda. If you're here, I'm pretty sure that you care about how to optimize your meetings, and I'm sure you've read all those Medium articles and agile practices about how you should be ruthless with your time and be really, really efficient. And you should, but at the same time, do be mindful about this because too much time pressure does eclipse the opinions of less vocal participants because people get anxious about getting their say in and it just doesn't create an ideal environment for everyone to get their opinions heard. So we've talked about things that you can do before a meeting, like sending an agenda in advance to have everyone come prepared to the meeting, being selective with the invites so that you keep the lean and less intimidating, and budgeting enough time to provide enough space for everyone to talk. So let's dive into things that you can do during the meeting itself and talk about opening up the space, WIGS, which is an abbreviation for 5 strategies that we'll be talking about, and wrapping it up. So let's fast forward to the day and the time of the meeting and talk about opening up the space and making sure that the playing field is level. A few ways that you can do that are, number 1, with the principle in mind that equal seating equals equal value, make sure that everyone in the room is spread across equally. So if you notice some people bunched up at one end, make sure that everyone's sitting around the table so that everyone can be equally seen and heard. This is especially important for remote workers because it's really hard to track conversations visually because you're looking at a really small screen, you can't really see everyone's faces, and it's really hard to see those visual cues. And it's also really hard to track conversations audibly because people have different distances to the microphone. So if you're a remote worker, you may be thinking, I can't hear whoever that is across the room. Who's talking? What are they saying? This situation just really sucks. And no one likes being the awkward, ginormous chat head in the room. So try and go from this really cheesy stock photo to something more like this and have everyone dial in individually from their computers. So this is a real screenshot from a meeting that I have every other week with a bunch of designers who are based in Sydney. I'm one of the few designers who are based in the US. And so a few months ago, what would happen is that everyone in Sydney would congregate in a room and have this really lively discussion, and it'd just be really awkward for me to be like, hey, pay attention to me. That's not really my personality to like interject. It's kind of difficult to find those pauses where I can interject. So we use a tool called Zoom. It's just another video conferencing tool that lets you see everyone's beautiful faces in a grid, and it's just awesome. And this is actually a practice that we took from our friends at Trello. Trello is really great at remote work. They have a really awesome remote working guide. If you're interested in learning more, you can just Google Trello remote working guide, and you can learn a little bit more about how Trello does things. So another thing that you can do is to make everyone feel welcome. When you go into a meeting, especially meetings in which you're meeting with totally new people, it's kind of awkward to just dive into the meat of the discussion. So try and break the ice with a really simple question. Have everyone go around the room, like, what's something good that happened to you recently, or what's a non-work related goal of yours? This just helps to break the ice, diffuse initial tensions, and get to know each other a little bit more before diving into the meat of the topic. So we've talked about how you can level the playing field by making everyone feel welcome and seen and heard. And before you kick off the actual discussion, lay a few ground rules. A few of our favorites are, number one, don't talk over each other. I think everyone in this room knows that it's rude and bad to interrupt other people, but I think when you get excited and enthusiastic about something, sometimes you forget, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but just having it and saying in the beginning of a meeting not to talk over each other just helps to keep that thought in the forefront of people's mind and deters the behavior. 2, discuss the meeting structure. So are you going to run the meeting round robin style where everyone goes around the room and says what they're thinking? Or are you going to have a speaking totem that you pass around? What's it going to be? And 3, review the agenda. So review roles and responsibilities, who's going to be the facilitator, who's going to take notes, what's it going to be, and also review the meeting goals. And this helps to keep the meeting organized. So now that we've talked about how you can open up the space, let's talk about 5 strategies that you can run the discussion itself that we're abbreviating as WIGs, just because of the start of the letter. Okay, let me put my rig on. Okay, can you help me?
There you go.
Alrighty. So, the first W in WIGs is to get the whole squad in on the action, and this means proactively calling our participants who you notice aren't really actively contributing for whatever reason. So, if you must have people dial in remotely, this means checking in on them occasionally to make sure that they're doing okay and if they have anything that they want to add. And I know when you do so, do be careful about putting pressure on people to contribute something meaningful. So instead of saying something like, what's something you think we should be considering? Say something a little bit more closed, like, do you agree with everything that's been said so far? This closed question is really easy to answer, like yes or no, and if people want to, they can choose to elaborate on it. So it provides that space without putting pressure on them. The second W in WIGs is to write it down. I know we're all addicted to our phones and our computers, but I do urge you all to harness the ancient art of the written language. And 2 ways that you can do that are, number 1, using the whiteboard to your advantage. If you notice that one person is dominating the conversation, give them the pen, which forces them to shut the hell up, and also to take notes and create space for other people. 2, write things down on Post-its and share. This is really similar to just having everyone go around the room and say what they're thinking, but this is more about taking the time to think individually about their thoughts, writing it down and sharing it. So really good for introverts. The I in WIGs is to interrupt interruptions. So if you can, try and foster a culture where people feel comfortable pointing out when someone has been interrupted. And I know this can be really intimidating. I'm personally intimidated by this because I'm very non-confrontational. So if you're like me, try and come equipped with phrases like, hang on a sec, I want to make sure I want to understand Fatima's point before we add on to it. This is a really neutral, diplomatic phrase that will hurt no one's feelings and no one will get called out. However, if you do notice that someone's being especially egregious with interrupting other people, try and take them aside after the meeting and talk to them one-on-one about it. And the G in WIGs is to give credit where it's due. And this is basically just about giving credit and pointing out when someone makes a good point. So a good example of this in practice is the White House staff during Obama's presidency. When a woman made a key point, other women would repeat it, giving credit to its author. And this forced the men in the room to recognize the contribution. And this doesn't necessarily have to be a woman to a woman or a woman to a man or gendered at all. Whenever you notice someone being inadvertently silenced, just be a good citizen, call out their good point, and move on. Ooh. Clicky. Alrighty, so the last strategy that I'll leave you with today as far as discussing the meeting itself is to get on the same page with the Fist of 5. And the Fist of 5 is an agile methodology used to help gain consensus. So how it works is that the meeting facilitator will have a statement or a decision that the group may decide to move on with, and everyone shows their level of support with a fist. So a closed fist is that they don't support it at all, and a fist with 5 fingers means that high five, let's do this thing, they totally support it. And everyone with a fist with less than 3 has the opportunity to express their opinions and the group can discuss it. So this is a non-confrontational way to dissent to an opinion. So we're gonna try it, and this is the interactive portion of this. I want you all to quickly get into groups of 5, and we're gonna take 5 minutes to try out the Fist of 5. There's gonna be a statement on the screen, and as a reminder, 0 is that you don't support it at all, 5 is that you fully support it, and anyone with less than 3 fingers has the opportunity to talk it out with the group. And we're gonna take 5 minutes for this, so if everyone can get into groups of 5 really quickly. The statement that we're gonna be discussing is...
just with the people around you.
Confidence is the best Atlassian product.
Okay. Looks like we're about ready.
Wait,
Oh, they started.
Really? Okay, that was
on
soon.
there.
Yeah.
So
19 minutes. I love it.
they're doing it. Maybe this is a good time to take off our wigs.
Oh, but then you're going to do the review of wigs.
Ah,
and then we'll
fine.
kick it
Yeah,
off.
fine.
I think it's good.
Everyone's actually... What time? When did we start that?
I don't remember.
The rest of the talk only takes a few minutes. So maybe give them like 2 more minutes at 20. Or I guess it's at 16. Like 1 more minute.
How's my hair? We look so goofy with our wigs.
We look amazing.
Yeah.
Your bangs are out, so it's like you have
Oh.
red hair but black bangs. No, it looks good.
Okay. 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 I feel like it's dying. Maybe 17.
Is this recorded?
I thought it was, but I don't see a camera.
Oh well.
Should we do like 17? Seems like it's kind of quieting down.
I can give them 1 more minute. People are still talking.
Okay.
I think we can see once they like quiet down. Okay, I think people are about ready.
Okay. The mic's not working. Should we take
Yeah,
one?
let's just do it at 16.
Okay.
You say no.
Okay. Okay, it's been, I don't know. Okay, it's been 5 minutes, so let's regroup. Da-da-da. Okay, everyone, pay attention to me. Alrighty, how was that? Good? Thumbs up? Yay. Okay, I hope you all use the Fist of 5 in your next meeting, and I hope you found it helpful. As far as this statement goes, I work on Bitbucket, so I personally do not agree with it at all. So we've gone through 5 strategies, WIGs, that you can use to facilitate the meeting itself, and let's say that the meeting went really, really well. Now you want to end it on a good note and wrap it up. So ways that you can do that are reviewing the key discussion points and decisions, clarifying next steps and DRIs, which stands for directly responsible individuals, and creating awareness of the value created. And this basically just means celebrating your wins. And you can do that by saying something like, okay, what did we do today? We talked about XYZ, we decided on ABC, now we're unblocked, see you all next week. And this just helps to spread the good vibes and keep the momentum going. So now I'm going to pass it on to Hillary to close us out on after the meeting.
Okay, so we've talked about setting an agenda, being selective, and budgeting time before a meeting. During a meeting, you should open up the space, use our beautiful wigs, and wrap it up. And after a meeting, if you're the facilitator, you really shouldn't just get back to your desk, kick up your feet, take your wig off, and call it a day. You really should do a couple more things to make sure all of the value created there continues on. So make sure you circulate a follow-up, leave the door open, and keep tabs on your action items. And so a follow-up doesn't have to be a separate document. It should be maybe just your meeting notes if you used our template. But just make sure that you send it out to your colleagues afterwards so that you reiterate what went down. Repetitive comms are necessary. It's the bane of my existence. But in this follow-up, you need to make sure that you capture key takeaways. What was discussed and what decisions were made? Did you do the Fist of 5? What was the outcome there? Actions. So what actually needs to get done based on those key takeaways? And then for those actions, who's going to do them? Those directly responsible individuals are really important because if solely one person is not assigned to a task, it's far less likely to get done. And so make sure you know that that person knows when they need to get something done and what exactly it is. Next, leave the door open. And what that means is just proactively soliciting ideas after the meeting. This is especially important for introverts because we know that maybe they didn't want to speak up in the meeting, as you heard Charlotte, our designer, say in the video. But if you do something like ping your Slack room saying, hey, did anyone think of anything after we met about the roadmap? This way our friend, introverted Izzy, has a chance to write down her thoughts and share it out so that maybe you get the best outcome that didn't even come up. And lastly, keep tabs on action items. So if you're the facilitator of the meeting, you don't want the momentum to die after everyone leaves the room. So just follow up with those directly responsible individuals and make sure that that stuff actually gets done. I think a lot of these things sound super simple, but if you just remember to do them, they make a big difference. So let's review. What strategies did we cover to make your meetings more inclusive and ultimately better? Before a meeting, set an agenda, be selective, and budget time. After a meeting, open the space, use wigs, and wrap it up. During a meeting. And after a meeting, circulate the follow-up, leave the door open, and keep tabs on action items. And I know that we covered a lot of content here today, and you actually can find all of this content in our playbook. We have a play for inclusive meetings that covers all of this good stuff. So head over to the Atlassian playbook. You can find it at this URL. You can Google Atlassian inclusive meetings, or you can head up to the playbook booth and talk to them there because they were a huge part of making this play happen, and there's a ton of good stuff there from customer interviews to empathy mapping. And while you're up there at the playbook booth, make sure you go and check out our friends who gave us the wigs.
K19T software.
K-15.
Oh, K-15.
K-15
Sorry.
software.
I don't know where I got 19.
And so we passed out those little pieces of paper, and we know that if we can harness all of the diverse perspectives in the room, we end up with better outcomes, right? So we want to harness all of your diverse perspectives and see if maybe we missed out on anything that works really well at your companies. We got a couple more. Okay, so we're going to reach in here. So, this is kind of hard to read. Okay, I'll start. So Dennis from the National Bank of Canada said, make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. And I think that that's something that we covered, and doing round robin style is really helpful with that. Thank you, Dennis.
Frank from mobile.de/eBay said, only invite different roles and knowledge people. Leave open questions to the end to discuss afterwards. Thanks, Frank.
Christina from TO1 said, make sure that you prepare a meeting in advance and set an agenda to try and get everyone to participate. So yeah, I think that's a really good one, and it makes a big difference if people know beforehand. We covered that. Says open the meeting, explaining things, allowing participants to talk. So we have a lot of good stuff in here. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, we can do maybe 2 more.
Okay.
Darren from Aspex, I think. Anyone? Says, have people brainstorm beforehand and surface image in the agenda. So, thank you.
Thank
agenda.
you,
Yes.
Darren. Okay, here we have Steven from Atlassian says, make sure you bring a rubber chicken so that you can honk it when people are talking too much. That's actually something that we do at Atlassian. Yeah, rubber chicken is an easy way to make it so that everyone laughs instead of you feel like, ooh.
Yeah.
No,
I just have 2.
Oh, this is, okay, so Thomas from App Dynamics. Engage responses instead of petitioning for them. So that's something that kind of ties on to what we were talking about. But yeah, just make sure that when people are responding around the room, you really engage them. And I think that you want a bit of discourse and competition and making sure that people are arguing to get the best point, but also engage with all of your employees. Don't just set them aside. So thank you so much for sending these in. We're going to read through all of them, and if there's anything that we didn't cover, add it into the play. We'll reach out to you if we can. I guess we only have your first name. But thank you so much, and we're open to questions. We'd love to hear what else you have to say.
Questions? I can run the mic to you.
What would you do if you were working with a group and you had one senior person who was a bit of a queen and loves to talk, and you can't really shoot them down or tell them, like, you can't rub a chick in them because they wouldn't find it funny because they have a huge ego. So how would you manage that when everyone else is rolling their eyes and like, here we go again, this creative queen in the room? Yeah.
Yeah. Seniority is something that definitely makes it difficult, and I think that the best piece of advice I would give there is have that person write on the board, because if you're writing down what everyone's saying, you have to listen. You can't just write your own thoughts, because if everyone's talking in the room, even if you're a huge queen, you still have to pay attention. So that's the one that we found is actually tried and tested and has been shown to work.
Yeah, I would add on to that in that it can be really intimidating going to that really senior person and telling them to, like, hey, shut up. So what you can do is talk to an ally who's like maybe a little bit more senior than you, who you're comfortable talking to, and then maybe that person can talk to that person. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Sure.
Hello, thanks. What about the people that don't feel comfortable to express their opinion because probably they are shy or introversive, as you say? What you can do about this?
Yeah, so that's introverted people. There are lots of things that you could do. So all of the written things, like running a meeting where maybe you suggest to the facilitator, let's write down our ideas on Post-its. And actually a lot of studies have shown that when groups go apart, think about things on their own, write things down, and then come back together, they come up with more ideas. And so if you write down on Post-its, then that introverted person, maybe you're shy, you have it written down, and then when it's your turn to speak, you can just read off your Post-it or put it up on the board and have whoever's on the board reading the Post-it. So that way your idea gets heard without you having to interject.
For example, there are some managers in this meeting, and the people don't feel comfortable to express because probably they are afraid or whatever. So in this case, what you can do, you should like point and say, hey, can you say something about this? Or
Yeah, so Leanna covered that. Do you want to talk about it? Just asking a close-ended question. So if you see that somebody's not participating, instead of saying, hey, what do you think? Actually say maybe, hey, do you agree with everything that's happened so far? So that way they know they can say yes or no, and if they're too shy and they don't want to talk about it, they don't have to. But if you say, actually, no, I thought about something 5 minutes ago, but I didn't get a chance to say it, when you pause and address someone and give them that opportunity, it allows them to speak up without having to like cut people off and jump in, which I know a lot of the times you have to do.
Hello, excellent talk. Wanted to ask, as a facilitator, how you recommend that you, like, how do you know if you're doing this better and how do you know if you're improving? Do you have a suggestion of like how to go about constantly trying to improve that and getting feedback from meeting goers?
Yeah, I think that my best advice would be just talk to the people in your meetings afterwards. Like, you're probably walking somewhere after and be like, how do you think that went? Do you think that there's anything we could do better? If you actually say, like, what could be better, don't even give an option for, is there something we could do? It forces people to think about how they can improve and give you good feedback. I don't think it's worth it to, like, send out a survey, like, how are my meetings on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, I don't think anyone actually is going to do that. But just ask people for feedback. And I think that if you see changes in the feedback over time, that's your best bet to know how people are perceiving you as a facilitator.
I would agree.
Thanks.
Thanks. We have about 3 more minutes. If anyone has anything. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering how you handle that when people speak up a lot in a meeting and people were missing the context. So they were basically, others were driving the presentation or the whole meeting and dragging it into one direction, and you didn't want to interrupt them. But you missed the context. So when you're like, when you have the availability to speak then up, then the context is gone and nobody actually remembers like what you're talking about because they are like more in the direction where the conversation went on.
I think when that happens, you can go back to the agenda and the discussion points and just say, okay, I think we're going on a tangent here. Let's get back to the agenda and what are the meeting goals.
Or you could also say, like, I really love that point. Before we move on to the next thing, can we just clarify what we talked about before because I missed it? Or something like, or because so-and-so missed it. If there's like a gap in the context beforehand, just, I think if you're following agenda as you go to the next section, I think that's a good time to say like, actually, let's clarify this thing that happened before we move on.
Back.
Hi. So do you have any tips and tricks or some special hacks for encouraging people to be on time for meetings, like daily, like daily stand-ups and all that?
Bring snacks. People love snacks.
Oh, did you have an answer for that?
That's a great incentive.
Yeah.
Harness the power of the room. Okay, did you hear what she said?
So for our stand-ups internally, if you're the last person in the room, you have to be the first to talk. So everybody rushes to the meeting room on time. And
That's good.
Another one?
We actually use the rubber chicken in a different way, or we use it in meetings as well, but we also use it for getting people together for the meeting. So one person for the stand-up every week has the rubber chicken, and that person is supposed to go around and gather everybody, and if they're not coming, go to start squeaking in the office, and that annoys the hell out of everybody. And so since we introduced that a few months ago, the attention rate has really gone up on those stand-ups.
Yeah,
Love it.
that's a great one. And we have like 30 seconds left. Are there any other good tips from your companies that we didn't read out of the hat that you want to share with the room? I think every company does things differently, so it's good to hear from people across the world.
I would just highly recommend the high quality rubber picks that you can get as well. We have one like that, and it's really great. It makes a slightly more agreeable noise while still being really loud.
Awesome. I think we're going to wrap it there. Those were amazing tips. Big round of applause again for our